So on Tuesday, when we were out of school for Veterans Day, I spent my whole day designing a project-based learning that ties into science, reading, and grammar. And what I did is I went first to the science standards because I knew that they'd be getting the AMSTI kit about the animals and the ecosystems. And so I pulled directly from their standards the things that they need to be able to answer, all the way down to the verbiage. So if it said to classify if it's a vertebrate or invertebrate, I made that something that would go directly on the rubric. So I developed all of that, and then what I did is I went down to reading and I determined what skills we could do with that. And I thought that main idea would be good because if we're doing an informational text, then we can look at text features, and main idea and details ties into that directly.
That would work,
So what the kids are going to do is they're going to create an iBook, and their main idea is going to be the section for each part of the iBook, and they're going to create a graphic organizer using Wixie first, and then the details will tie into what goes into each section.
That will be great.
Yeah.
And they'll be very engaged.
Yes. And then later on what they're going to do is they're going to talk about cause and effect, and there's also an organizer in Wixie for that. And so they can do cause and effect, like with the food chain and adaptations, what causes them to need that adaptation, what effect does that have on their ecosystem. So that's what they will be doing for reading. And then with grammar, we had talked a lot about wanting to tie it into writing. So I'm thinking what we're going to do is we'll use all the skills they've already learned to put in a rubric, and then one of our focuses will be to pull quotes from informational text, because we've done quotations using dialogue, but we also have to know how to do it from an informational text.
Yes, and hey, I typed up kind of a visual for what we talked about the other day. So we can look at that a little later, so that it's pretty and neat for us to understand. And this might help us with laying out the grammar, so that it's connected with the reading and writing, and it's kind of cohesive.
Oh, that's great.
So we can talk about that afterwards,
that's
and I'll
great.
send you a copy. So you've got science, reading, writing, and grammar standards that you've incorporated into your, and you've basically done this because you're the reading teacher, and we've got 3 reading teachers and 3 math and science teachers. So you've basically created this unit for your entire grade level for both.
Yep.
That's awesome. They are going to love you.
I hope so.
All right, so I have the EQuIP Rubric for lessons and units. And what this does is kind of, there's 4 sections. It talks about the alignment to Common Core, how the bulleted items of how to address the key shifts in Common Core, if the lesson that we're analyzing is supported instructionally, and then assessments. So what we'll do is kind of use one column of this rubric to analyze your unit, and we'll make sure that we have all the components that student learning would need.
Okay.
All right, so because this is probably a bit overwhelming, this rubric takes the 3rd column for instructional support and breaks it down. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bulleted items that will look for evidence in your unit. And then if we're missing it, then we'll figure out if we need to add. Now what do we do? So that'll just make sure. And you did this type of instruction at your other school, right? So you've got a lot of background with this. All right, so let's start with the first one. Cultivates student interest and engagement in reading, writing, and speaking about text. All right, so let's go in. And I know you probably haven't gotten like the daily lessons done at this point, or have you?
Kind of.
Okay,
just a little bit.
All right, so where in your unit could we find evidence that it cultivates student interest and engagement? And it talks about reading, writing, and speaking about text.
Well, I think that it all starts in science, because they will be getting the AMSTI kit, which is engaging in itself, I think. So I think ecosystems is always something that the kids love to learn about anyway. So if we're doing it in science and they have the kids, they have all those materials. And then when they come in here and we're using a mentor text and different things, I think it's going to engage them. I think that them doing the research alone on an animal would be engagement.
Okay.
Technology is always engagement.
It is. And we talked about them taking that website and creating an animal.
The switch through.
Yes, yes. So they
That
would
would be really
create
cool.
the head, the body, and the tail,
Mm-hmm.
3 different types of animals, and tell why they would survive.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
So they would have to defend that with research and evidence.
Mhm.
Okay. So I think we're definitely covered in that. All right, addresses instructional expectations and is easy to understand and use.
I think that the rubrics, once we develop an actual rubric, because I already have the questions all laid out, but when you put it in a rubric, kid-friendly format, I think that it will be really easy to understand and really easy for them to see what our expectations are.
And I think with our recent study on learning targets and I can statements, that really addresses instructional expectations not only in your lesson plans for the teacher, but for the students and what's expected, what we expect out of them. So I want to write that. All right, number 3. Provides all students with multiple opportunities to engage with the text of appropriate complexity for grade level. Includes appropriate scaffolding so that students directly experience the complexity of the text.
Well, yeah, as far as scaffolding goes, because we're going to start it as a whole group. I mean, I'm obviously going to start it as a model. They're not just going to get it right away. And we'll be kind of facilitating, so we'll be around the room as the students are learning or researching. And as far as the complexity goes, I think it will be right on grade level because we'll be using things like ABL that are very kid-friendly but still good informational text.
Okay. Solid informational text. All right, and then we do have some resources that if we found a text, we could print it on certain levels. So we could change the level using the same text. Alright, so I'll put that in level text resource. And I think it's called Muzella. And then there's one more. Alright. Number 4, focuses on challenging sections of text and engages students in a productive struggle through discussion, questions, and other supports that build towards independence. I know that's a big thing that 4th grade has been discussing lately, is building your students up to be independent.
Well, and I think that that comes with modeling again too. If we start by modeling it, and then they're going to have partners in what they're doing. And I always tell my kids, before you come to me, you need to make sure you've talked with a neighbor and you've reread what you're doing.
Okay.
So hopefully
maybe
that will lead to some independence.
Okay, and then so you use like peer conferencing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Number 5, integrates appropriate supports in reading, writing, listening, and speaking for students who are ELL, have disabilities, or read well below the grade level text band.
Well, they'll be with partners. I'm not going to partner 2 students together that both need a lot of extra help.
So varied levels in your grouping.
Yeah, I don't want them all the exact same. And like I said earlier, we'll be facilitating. If I need to pull a group to help them read and kind of analyze the text, then we'll definitely do that.
Okay.
And then you talked about the levelized stuff to add in earlier, which I think will be a big help.
Okay. All right, number 6, provides extensions and or more advanced text for students who read well above the grade level band.
That's the cool thing about ABL is it has the different levels you can go to. So those students who do need more and want more are always open to go to that, as long as they're able to actually read and understand what they're doing.
Okay. All right, is there anything we need to maybe add on, or?
I mean, I'm sure there's something we could come up with.
But I really like how you've got that cross-curricular component, and we have a plan to integrate grammar into the writing, which supports the reading from your science content. So that way things aren't still sterile like we used to do.
Yes. I love this.
I know. All right, you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I feel like you have done a great job with including the instructional supports that this rubric requires. It's impressive.
Thanks.
I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
All right, so this one starts out with a reading text and learning target. So for example, your learning target could be, I can identify an audience, topic, and purpose. So that's when you've introduced an informative topic for your research. All right, so then you've had your day-to-day lesson on that. It might take 1, it might take 2 days. Then you eventually get to where you're going to write about whatever you've been discussing here in your reading. So your learning target could be, I can choose an audience, topic, or text. So the validity of that throughout your writing would in turn support your reading targets.
Ooh, this just made me think too. This will go back to conclusions.
Yeah.
To pull into reading.
All right, we'll write that down. All right, and so on the rubric, we could add that to conclusions, connecting reading and writing. See integrated template. Okay. So then you would introduce a grammar focus, which you talked about, quotations.
Quotations is one of the main ones.
So that would support the research and then finding evidence from the text and citing that. And then your example could be, I can use simple sentences or the quotations. So this goes back to the editor's checklist that we saw in Jeff Anderson's Mechanically Inclined. Do you have?
Yes.
You do have that copy. Okay, good. So then as you go, we talked about creating that checklist with the students. And then Anthony created this document so that you've got your standard, you've got your essential statement or your I can statement, and then these are like in that Common Core companion book where it gives you the things to consider and the questions that would support that standard. Each one of those are broken down here. And then they can rate themselves on a 0, 1, or 2 and put an explanation so that when you make it around to have student conferences, they have explained why they're here. And you can in turn assess them and decide.
I need a copy of that.
So we could make one of these for all 3 modes.
Yeah.
And it incorporates your reading standards also in here too.
I love that.
So, and then, you could start here. All right, this is our focus for today. Did we accomplish that? And moving to here, because all of these would in turn support mastery of this standard.
Yes, and I love that it's all self-assessment for the kids. That's great.
All right. So then you'd add that expectation to your editor's checklist. And I guess just to keep myself focused, I was thinking, if I think of this as the target, not the expectation at this time. So we don't necessarily want them to master it right now because we're just now introducing it.
Right.
And that was kind of, remember the first day we talked about introduce and maybe formatively assess with a quick check as a first step. So then you move back into reading and you can introduce a new text but with the same grammar focus. So you're going to have them find the use of quotations in a text using a mentor text. And And then you could bring in either the same or another reading standard. I can track sequence of events in a story. So here you could put the conclusions, because here they're identifying an audience, topic, purpose, genre, and then here you could support the conclusions.
That's a great idea.
And then they can identify the use of this grammar skill if it's applicable in an independent text. So like if they're reading their library book, everybody has a library book, they find that grammar skill in their own independent reading.
Ooh, and that's so meaningful. We've been doing that with our sentences.
Oh, yeah.
The subject and predicate stuff.
Did you
And I
use
love
Jeff
it.
Anderson's?
Yes.
Isn't it
I
awesome?
stole that from her.
Yes. All right. So, and that would be a good formative assessment. Anthony uses Sketch to do that. So I'm going to let him show me how to do that.
Yeah.
because I haven't used
I've never
Sketch.
heard of that.
So then you move to the writing and you apply the reading to your writing. I can sequence events in a story, in my own story. And then I can revise my writing to use whatever the grammar is. So then you see that your target has been mastered.
Okay.
And by then you have this editor's checklist that you've added to, which could look something like this. And then you've got students using this editor's checklist to assess themselves. And we could do the same thing we talked about, how you would have like the 3-column rubric where they're self-assessing, peer assessing, and then you've got the teacher.
Assess.
Yeah. And then you bump back around to introducing a new target. And you could still be on the same text, and you could still be on the same writing and introducing a new grammar topic, and it just keeps going. Isn't that neat?
I'm excited about this.
We did so good.
I know. I love it.
All right. Well, I think this looks great. Thank you for meeting with me and letting me use the rubric with your unit.
Thank you.
Okay.